Good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Bruner. I am the exotic forest pest educator with Purdue University, and today is I believe, second session of Emerald Ash Borer University. Today we are hosting Brittany Barker and Aaron Posthumus. Please let me know if I pronounced that correctly. They are going to be talking to us today a little bit about some of the interesting aspects of technology that we can use when determining how invasive species are going to encroach on different landscapes. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let the two of them take over.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it. So, hello, everybody. Good morning. Well, it's morning for me. I guess still sort of morning for you. My name is Brittany Barker. I'm an assistant research professor at the Oregon IPM Center and Department of Horticulture at Oregon State University. Aaron, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
My name's Erin Posthumus. I'm the Partnerships and Projects Manager here at the USA National Phenology Network at the University of Arizona.
All right, and today we're going to be talking to you about real-time forecasting of phenology and climate suitability for emerald ash borer, as well as two other invasive pests in the United States. Okay, so the outline of the presentation today includes me trying to convince you why it's important to forecast emerald ash borer, which I'll also refer to as EAB, as well as other invasive pests. Second, how we're using a platform called DDRP at uspest.org to produce these forecasts. And then third, how we're delivering the forecasts through the USA National Phenology Network. And fourth, some of the applications of the forecasts. And then finally, I'll end with talking about some additional resources and takeaways from the presentation. So probably most of you on the call today are probably pretty aware of emerald ash borer and why it's a very bad invasive species. But just in case, I'll go ahead and give a quick overview. So emerald ash borer, Agralis planipennis, is native to East Asia. And it was first detected in Michigan in 2002. And since then, it has destroyed millions of ash across eastern North America. And it is considered to be the most damaging forest pest on the continent, where it's present now in 37 US states and 6 Canadian provinces. It's also been found in Russia, and it is starting to spread in the Moscow region and potentially into Eastern Europe. The larvae feed at the phloem and xylem interface of the ash trees, which cuts off the movement of food to the roots and water to the canopy, typically killing a tree within a few years. So the insect, as I mentioned, has destroyed millions of ash, and this has had both economic and ecological consequences. So this photo is kind of a famous, I feel like I see this photo in every single EAB presentation I've been to that shows like some sort of like suburban neighborhood here where we have these beautiful ash trees that line the street. And then just a few years later, after EAB comes in, those trees are all dead. The photos down on the bottom here are showing native ash forests that have been are being decimated by the emerald ash borer. And over to the left here shows a larva. This is a J larva, so it's called a J larva because it curls itself up into a J shape and showing the damage inside of the tree. So up to 99% of all ash trees are typically killed within 8 to 10 years of the beetle arriving. And some ash species do show some resistance to EAB, but none are completely resistant. On a positive note, IPM programs, including biocontrol, are helping managers to control the pests. But we hope that these forecasts that we're going to be showing today can offer you some further help with management. So this map right here is showing the approximate range of native ash species in the United States, as well as county level detections of EAB. This map is from spring of 2023. I could not find a newer map. I don't know if they stopped making these maps, but it is a tiny bit outdated. So there are some counties where the red dot is missing. I went ahead and added some additional dots here in Oregon because unfortunately, EAB has now been found in at least 4 different counties in Oregon, so in the Willamette Valley area. So the first one was detected in 2022 in Forest Grove, Oregon, and last year they did detect a few more populations. And this is very disturbing because Oregon ash is our only native species of Fraxinus in the western United States. It extends through western Oregon, Washington, and California, and also into the Sierra Nevadas. And it's estimated that the emerald ash borer could potentially lead to the functional loss of this ash species in some of these critical riparian areas in Oregon. And so we want to do everything we can to minimize its spread. The pest is also continuing to expand into southern US states and also into these like the Great Plains, well, yeah, this like kind of Midwest area and also up north. It's extending further north into Canada as well. So 90% of EAB's life cycle is inside of the cambium tissue under the ash bark. So this includes all the immature stages, including these different larval instars shown at the bottom of the slide here, as well as the pupae. And EAB's life cycle can vary somewhat across regions. In very cold areas, it can have a 2-year life cycle, whereas in warmer areas, it will have a 1-year life cycle. And it undergoes an obligatory diapause in the final larval instar stage, which, as I mentioned a minute ago, is called a J larva because it folds up into this J shape. And pupation occurs after the winter as temperatures are getting warmer. And at this point, the insects are still inside of the tree. After pupation, the adult beetles emerge from the tree and they form these D-shaped exit holes. And then the adults feed along the margins of ash trees on the leaves and they mate, and then the females lay eggs singly in bark crevices or under the bark scales. Oops, excuse me, sorry about that. Okay, so after the eggs hatch, the larvae tunnel into the tree, and this is where most of the damage is caused, is in these like kind of larval instars 1, 2, 3, and 4, where they're feeding on the tree tissues. Okay, so the reason I'm showing you the life cycle is because it is very important for us to understand when these different life stages of EAB are going to be present. So phenology, if you're not familiar with that term, basically means like the seasonal development of an organism over the year. So this is in response primarily to temperature because insects are ectotherms, and so their development is driven by their external heat. And so phenology varies both annually because of annual variations in weather. It also varies geographically because, of course, we have like elevational change, we have latitudinal change that is associated with different temperatures. This is important because surveillance of emerald ash borer typically targets the adult stage because, as I mentioned, most of the life cycle occurs inside of the tree. The adults are the only life stage that is like more like easily detectable. And also you can use pheromone lures to lure it into traps so that then they get stuck to these sticky traps, such as the purple prism trap at the shown in the bottom of the slide here. Additionally, insecticides that target the immature stages or the adult stages are more effective when they're applied prior to that life stage being present. For example, the systemic insecticides shown here in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, those need to be injected at least a few weeks before the life stage will be present because it needs to be taken up into the tree tissue, so it needs to move through the tree. Also, biocontrol agents, which currently we have for at least 4 parasitoid wasps, they target the immature stages of EAB. So for example, Obius abrili is an egg parasitoid, and so the eggs need to be present for it to, for it to reproduce, for it to lay its eggs inside of that EAB egg. And then these 2 Spathius parasitoid wasps, those are larval parasitoids, so the EAB larvae need to be present. Additionally, Tetrasticus planipennicii, that one also is a larval parasitoid for EAB. So those parasitoids will not survive if the EAB life stage, if like the egg for Obius or the larva for the 3 other parasitoids, if those are not present, the parasitoid will die. Okay, so where can EA be established? So emerald ash borer does have a very wide climatic tolerance. It can tolerate temperatures as low as -30 degrees Celsius for at least short periods of time. However, it is still somewhat unclear exactly how tolerant the speed, like where it could potentially go. There have been several climate suitability modeling studies of EAB, but most of those are based on averages of climate and also like those are historical climates. I would argue that we need to be using current climate data because climate is changing so rapidly that we need to account for that when we're estimating where potentially this pest will end up spreading to. because establishment risk is higher in these climatically suitable areas. Climate suitability, similar to phenology, varies annually and geographically. And so if we take a look at North America here, where I'm showing the approximate range boundary of the native ash species, up here at the northern range edge, where, the question is, are some of these northern populations going to be protected because it is too cold for EAB up there? Alternatively, maybe in the southern parts of some of these southern Fraxinus species, maybe they will be protected because it's too hot. We really don't know that for sure. And the same question goes for Europe. So I mentioned that EAB is present in the Moscow region of Russia, and people are very concerned it's going to spread, keeps spreading westward into Europe. So the same question goes: which areas are going to be too cold versus too hot? Okay, so now that I've kind of set up those questions, I am now going to argue that we need decision support models to help us predict, to answer these questions. The phenology models predict when to expect life stages of EAB or whatever other organism you're modeling. And subsequently, we can have timely surveillance and management that targets the life stage that we're interested in. Alternatively, climate suitability models predict where establishment is likely owing to these suitable climates. And we can use that information to focus our efforts in areas that are likely at higher risk of establishment. Okay, so now I'm going to move into talking about our platform at uspest.org called DDRP, where we're addressing these questions, where we have these models. So the DDRP platform stands for Degree, Day, Establishment Risk, and Phenological Event Maps. And it integrates mapping of phenology and climate suitability. And this is the only platform that has this capability, to my knowledge. So it addresses the question of both when and where to expect a pest. It's designed for real-time modeling, meaning that we use current climate data and we also use forecast climate data out through the end of the year. It uses a process-based approach. Specifically, the phenology is modeled using a heat unit called degree days, and climate suitability is modeled using climate stress units, so based on cold stress and heat stress. This is different than a statistical model, right? So there have been, for example, several statistical models developed for EAB, but those are data-driven. So that is different than a process-based model. A process-based model is based on these ecophysiological attributes of the organism. It is open source. It's written in the R programming language. So if you're a coder, you can go check out the current version of the platform at my GitHub repo at bbarker505/DDRP_v3. If you want to learn more details about the platform, you can check out our PLOS1 publication from 2020. Okay, so here I'll give a simplified overview of how DDRP works. And as I mentioned, if you want more details, check out our publication. So the program has two inputs: a species parameter file and climate data, gridded climate data for the time period that you're interested in. Currently, our forecasts are produced using PRISM, data from the PRISM database for current climate data. And then our forecast climate data comes from a data set called NMME. And we're also using 10-year averages for really far out, like towards the end of the year forecasts. And the species parameter file has information on developmental thresholds, thresholds for cold and heat stress, duration of life stages in degree day units, and then also parameters that allow for variation in the spring emergence times within a population. So next, the program steps through each day of the specified time period and separately models phenology and climate suitability. So in the phenology model, degree days will accumulate if the temperatures are within the upper and lower thresholds. And then the model predicts different phenological events and also the life stages that are present on any given date, the number of generations that have been completed, as well as some other outputs. In the climate suitability model, cold and heat stress units accumulate if the temperatures exceed the stress thresholds for the species. And these accumulations are used to estimate the potential distribution based on two levels of exclusion. These are called moderate stress exclusion and severe stress exclusion. So severe stress exclusion, those are going to be areas where long-term establishment is unlikely to occur. Areas that are under moderate stress exclusion could be areas where the pest could establish in the short term. Alternatively, these could be areas of uncertainty. So for a lot of the pests that we're modeling, we don't always have, you know, they're sometimes they're not well studied, and so we're a little unclear if potentially like what their stress thresholds are. So these could represent, as I mentioned, areas where we're uncertain, and as we get more data, we'll continue to refine the model. In the post-processing stage, we do some additional analyses, integrate the outputs of the phenology and climate suitability model, and produce the final maps. Okay, so shown here are two maps produced by DDRP using climate data for North America for 2021. So this is for the Emerald Ash Borer. And so again, this is like a historical map, right? So what Aaron is going to be talking about is how at the USA National Phenology Network, they're delivering the real-time forecasts. This is a map from a paper that we published a couple of years ago that introduced the model. And so these maps are for most of North America. The first map is showing first adult emergence, and the second map is showing first egg hatch. So I'll walk you through these maps here. So first of all, note that these areas that are light gray or dark gray, those are areas where EAB is predicted to be excluded by either cold stress or heat stress based on climate data for 2021. All right, so the blue line here is the approximate range boundary of the native ash species in North America. So unfortunately, and this wasn't too surprising because as I mentioned, we already kind of knew EAB had a very wide climate tolerance. But unfortunately, we see that areas that are excluded by climate stress largely fall outside of the range of ash. There are a few little pockets, for example, up here in central Canada, where it potentially could be, the ash could be protected in those areas, at least for some years. Down in the Southwest, we have heat stress predicted, but for the most part, ash species do not occur like in the Sonoran Desert where it's very hot. So anyway, that's unfortunate, but not too surprising, as I mentioned. Areas that are within the range boundary of ash here, these colored areas, those are the dates of the phenological event. And I'm kind of highlighting the areas outside of the native range of ash. I have semi-transparent because I'm trying to just highlight these areas within the native range of ash. But these are the week of the year that like first adult emergence or egg hatch is going to occur. So not surprisingly, first adult emergence is predicted to occur much later in the year compared to these southern latitudes. So that could be as late as August in some of these parts of Canada or higher elevations. Down in the southeast, we have emergence occurring as early as February and March. And then first egg hatch, if we look to the right-hand map, though that event is occurring at least probably like a few weeks later than first adult emergence. I also want to point out here that notice these white areas in the map. Those are areas where the phenological event was not predicted at all. So I mentioned that EAB can have a 2-year life cycle in very cold areas. So for first adult emergence, it could be that those areas, it could just overwinter a second time and then emerge the following year. But it could also be potentially that maybe EAB will not be able to complete its life cycle at all. So that will be something that we need to keep monitoring to figure out like at what point is it too cold for it to complete its life cycle. Okay, so we have found pretty good evidence for strong model performance. The first map I'm showing here is a map of climate suitability for EAB based on climate data for 20 recent years. So areas that are yellow are areas that were predicted by DDRP to be suitable across all 20 years. Areas that are dark blue were predicted to be suitable across none of the years, right? So it was unsuitable across all 20 years. And then we could have like the greenish areas were predicted to be suitable some years and not others. The pink dots are presence records that we use to validate the model. So we had about 3,000 presence records. And what we found is that over 98% of those 3,000 records were correctly predicted to be suitable, right? So we know at least that DDRP is predicting presence very well. And for the phenology model, we used about 50, I think about 50 or so monitoring data points to validate predictions for the adult events. Unfortunately, we did not have a lot of data for the immature stages. So like first pupation, we only had like 3 records, and first egg hatch, we also only had 3 records. So we need more data to really validate those predictions. But we did find high accuracy in high predictive accuracy for adult events. So if we notice like first adult emergence, peak adult emergence, and peak adult activity here, on this plot, it's showing predicted day of year on the y-axis and observed day of year on the x-axis. That black line, the diagonal line, is a one-to-one relationship. So if the model is completely accurate, you should see all of these little points here falling along that line. And what we see is that there is some error. But for the most part, these adult events are predicted within about a week, within a week. So the mean absolute error, MAE, is about a little over 7 days. So anyway, we conducted some additional validation analyses and found similar results where we have high accuracy of these adult events. So we have DDRP models for 18 invasive pests to date, including the emerald ash borer. And of the 18 pests, 5 are known to occur in the contiguous United States, including EAB, the spotted lanternfly, Asian longhorn beetle, Japanese beetle, and the light brown apple moth. Notice that we have many pests that are not yet present in the United States. And part of the main reason for that is that the USDA APHIS PPQ, they funded a lot of the work on DDRP. And they're primarily interested in making sure that these high priority agricultural pests do not become established in the US. And so they wanted us to develop these models to support their monitoring programs so that they can have early detection and rapid response and make sure that they do not become present. If you want, we also have DDRP models for 3 biological control insects, as well as an invasive fungal pathogen that causes boxwood blight. And the homepage for DDRP is at uspest.org/CAPS, where you can find additional information about the models for all these species. Okay, so I want to quickly, before we jump into Erin's part of the talk, I want to briefly talk about 2 additional invasive pests that are spreading in the US right now and are of high concern. So we're really wanting forecasts that can help us support the surveillance and management programs. This includes the spotted lanternfly, Lycorma delicatula, which I'll also refer to as SLF. So SLF is native to China. It's present in at least 18 states in the eastern United States. And its preferred host is tree of heaven, Ailanthus altissima. And unfortunately, tree of heaven is also invasive in the United States. And so areas with that preferred host plant are going to be particularly at high risk of establishment. But the pest is highly prolificous. It has several other additional hosts that it likes to feed on. Over 150 species have been found to be suitable for SLF. SLF attacks grapes, apples, hops, in addition to hardwood trees and many other crops. And the damage is done by direct feeding by the adult. So they are plant hoppers that have these sucking mouth parts. So they suck the fluid out of the plant. They also secrete, they pee. And so this honeydew accumulates and it can grow sooty mold that impedes photosynthesis by the plants. It can also attract secondary pests. So it has both indirect and direct impacts on the plants. The other pest that I want to highlight is Japanese beetle, Papillia japonica. And the Japanese beetle, which we'll refer to as JPB, is native to Japan. This particular pest has been in the eastern United States for a long time. Well, yeah, I think at least since the, what was it, like 1920s? I can't remember the exact year now, but it has been in the US longer than SLF and EAB. It's already pretty widespread throughout the eastern half of the United States, and it's also in parts of Canada as well. It has a limited distribution in the west half of the United States, and there are active eradication campaigns going on, for example, like in Oregon and Washington. So they're trying to prevent it, or they're trying to eradicate these local establishments. This pest is even more prolificous than the spotted lanternfly. It's known to feed on over 350 species. It also attacks plants in like different plants in different parts of its life cycle. So it spends most of its life cycle in the soil. So the eggs, larvae, and pupae are in the soil, and they feed on the roots of grasses, including turf grass. So the picture here in the bottom left is showing a severely damaged lawn by Japanese beetle infestation. They also attack many different plants in the adult stage, including field crops, berries, fruit trees, and also numerous varieties of ornamental plants. The other photos on this page, one is showing adult beetles that have skeletonized a leaf. So skeletonized means basically they chew the entire leaf except for like the veins of the leaf, right? So it looks like a skeleton. The other picture, the last picture here is showing adult beetles feeding on what looks like to me like a raspberry. Okay, so now I'm going to pass over the presentation to Erin, and she's going to talk about how they are delivering the forecast produced by DDRP at the USA National Phenology Network's website. So go ahead, Erin.
Thanks, Brittany. So just to give a little bit of a background on the NPN, so we were established back in 2007. Around this time, there was a report out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that actually mentioned that phenology, which is again the timing of life cycle events of plants and animals, is a really great way to understand climate change impacts on plants and animals. But at this time, there wasn't really a standardized way for people to collect that information. So we were co-founded by an ecologist from the US Geological Survey and a faculty member from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And really our goal is, and it was at that time and continues to be, to collect, store, and share phenology data and information. So we try to encourage people across the country to collect data, and we make those data available. We have kind of four main goals at the NPN. One is to just advance science by making data freely available, encouraging researchers to download and use the data. But we also want to try to inform decisions around phenology as well. And that involves making phenology information accessible and very usable by different decision makers and natural resource managers to make sure that it's kind of in the format that they need. We also do a lot of communicating and connecting around phenology. So we have lots of newsletters where we try to put scientific publications into a format that's easy to use in these publication summaries to try to make sure that everyone who is involved from the collecting of the phenology data up to the using of the phenology data kind of really understands the science. And we also are trying to grow an equitable and inclusive network. So we're right now completely overhauling our app where we have people inputting phenology data to make sure that we're really lowering barriers to participation and making sure that people that don't have a background in biology or botany can participate in our network. Next slide. So particularly relevant for this project here is our goal of informing decisions. So we work with a lot of natural resource managers across the country, such as people from the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Park Service, the Forest Service. And we found that they often want information that's very easy to use, that's very easy to access, and kind of gets to them at the time they need and in the format they need it. So just in discussions we've had and interactions, we've found that it's hard for them to kind of go in pursuit of information and try to digest complicated maps or different models and things like that. So one of our goals is to try to synthesize that information as much as possible and put that information in the format that these managers and decision managers need it. Next slide. So for these pests in particular, and all the other forecasts that we deliver, what we're really interested in is trying to give people information about when activity is going to start in their area. So rather than seeing kind of, what's going to happen throughout the year or what happened over the course of the last year, we want to try to give them information about what's happening right now at particular locations. Next slide. So this is an overview of kind of our process for creating the maps. So we've been working closely with Brittany and Len Coop at the US Pest to try to kind of synthesize the information that they deliver and create pheno forecast maps. So our first part of the process is to actually talk with the people who are hopefully using this information to find out their preferences about what they'd like to see. So a DDRP will produce many different life cycle stages in their models So we ask our stakeholders things like which life cycle stages are the most of interest, as well as what's the timing you would like to receive notifications about these forecasts, and other preferences on kind of what the phenoforecast maps will look like. We then take the DDRP models and maps and turn them into our maps, which are focused on what is happening today. So these are produced daily and available in multiple different formats, as I'll be talking about. We also deliver notifications that kind of eliminate the need for our users to go in pursuit of the maps and actually remember to go look for them. So we actually deliver email notifications that they can sign up for. And we also invite the users to report what they see in a couple of different formats. And then at the end of the year, we also do a survey to find out generally how did the maps perform and if there's any feedback that our users have to help us improve the maps. And then we also do some validation by looking at the performance of the maps to what people are actually reporting on the ground. Next slide. So just a little bit more detail about our survey process. So in our stakeholder preference surveys, which we do at the beginning of the forecast development, we ask them about kind of what the map should look like. Early on in our process, looking at both forecasts of EAB and SLF, we ask our stakeholders about what kind of map would be most useful. And that's where we got a lot of feedback that told us we really want to know what's happening today, or let me see a map that shows, you know, what are the what's the activity today, and then I can kind of see forward and backwards from there. We also ask about the life cycle stages and got input on which of the life cycles would be most interesting or useful. So for EAB, they're very interested in the emergence of adults and then also the first egg hatch. For SLF, they're interested in egg hatch and NIF emergence and also adults. And then we also asked them about the timing, you know, when would you want to see these maps? Kind of what's your planning period? Are you thinking about this in February where it's kind of before things start warming up and you're trying to plan over the course of the year? Or do you want to know what's happening right now? You're maybe planning just a couple weeks out. Or do you want to see like immediately what's happening right now? I got some feedback on that. And then in terms of the feedback from the end of the year, we ask, you know, how they use the forecast. We deliver the forecast in a couple of different formats, maps on landing pages and in our visualization tool, as I'll show, as well as forecasts. So we ask about the use in those different formats, and then ask for general feedback as well about how the maps performed. And generally, people were positive about how the maps performed. Or a lot of feedback was, well, I looked, but I didn't actually see the pest period this year. Next slide. So just getting into a little bit more detail about what our phenoforecast maps look like. This is a map for emerald ash borer for the life cycle stage of adults. So we have this map, and we also produce a map of egg hatch, which is not shown here. So basically what we're looking at is a forecast of the entire country. There's actually pixels within this map that are 2.5 kilometers wide. So that's kind of the scale that we're looking at. We are looking at kind of the thing that pops out at you is the yellow and the orange. So that's actually what's happening basically right now. So that orange color is where you can expect to see adults of emerald ash borer this week. And then the yellow is where we predict that activity to happen next week. And then we also are showing the activity that happened in the past. So we can see in the browns, it goes from last month to 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and then more than 3 months ago. So if you were kind of taking stock of what had happened in the past, you could look at this and see when the activity kind of stopped. And then we also look to the future as well and forecast beyond just next week into the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, next month, in 2 months, and then more than 2 months in the purple. And then you can also see on this map what Brittany was talking about earlier with those climate exclusions. So the areas where you would think that there would be color, but it's gray, that's showing that either the temperatures are too extreme for the pests to occur in those areas, or the length of time that would be suitable is too short for that life cycle to actually finish. So if you are, for example, in Indianapolis, you would expect that next week you would start to see EAB adults emerge in your area. If you are in Kansas City, you are probably seeing EAB right now. And again, this is showing the potential emergence of these pests. So this isn't necessarily saying that the pest occurs in every part of the country. We're kind of relying on the user to know that the pest is in my area. It's showing if the pest was there, this is when we would expect to see that activity. Next slide. Here is our map for Japanese beetle, and again for adults. We also have a forecast available for egg hatch for this species. And so you can see this is as of May 8th. The activity is a little bit further behind than EAB, so we're just now seeing activity around Atlanta, Charlotte, and those areas. That's where the conditions are suitable for emergence of that species at this time. And there's an even greater climate exclusion for this species. Next slide. And then finally for spotted lanternfly, this is for adults as well. We also have a forecast for egg hatch. And again, this is as of May 8th. It's even further behind. So these insects typically emerge even later. So we'll be seeing the activity start to hit areas like Pennsylvania probably over the summer. Next slide. So we have forecasts available for some other species as well. So I've just listed them out here. These are not DDRP models. We do have the DDRP model maps are for the 3 species that I just talked about, but we do have some other pheno forecasts available for additional species. And these are all on the website as well. Next slide. Okay, so if you would like to actually see what's happening right now and kind of further explore and kind of zoom in on the maps, you can do that in our visualization tool. And I'll actually put the link in the chat for that. But when you load up the Viz tool, what happens is you will enter this explore phenological findings. You'll pick map, you'll pick pheno forecast, and then you get to select from our list of species. We have multiple life cycle stages for EAB. So this one's the EAB adult. And then you can actually zoom in on the map. You can also change the opacity of the map too if you want it to be a little bit easier to see. And then you can actually click and see what the actual date of the forecast is for a particular location. So this is showing it's actually in the next 1 to 2 weeks is that yellow band. So this is predicting that that particular location that we clicked on, that 2.5 kilometer pixel, will see emergence on May 24th. And I'll put the link right now. Next slide. So I mentioned that we also have notifications available. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible so that you don't have to kind of go looking for the maps. They'll just kind of come to you at the right time. So you can sign up for your zip code. So I'll also put the link in the chat for that. And you can sign up for any one of our pheno forecasts there on that page. So it's kind of a long link, but that's our sign up. So if you had, for example, signed up for the location that's in red there, you would get notifications, 2 different notifications before the activity is predicted to start in your area. One of those is going to be 2 weeks in advance, and then the other one is 6 days in advance. And the email is on the right there, kind of a preview of what that would look like. So this one is for the forecast within 6 days. And in that email, you have an opportunity to click on the link to actually look at the forecast on the website. You can then go into the visualization tool and do that zooming in and exploring even further. And then we're also encouraging people to report their sightings either through Nature's Notebook or through EdMaps. And then we also have a learning module, which I can show some screen caps of, that helps people to kind of understand what they're looking for and how to report. The next slide. So the learning modules, we have them for EAB, SLF, and Japanese beetle. These are, they're fairly short. They're kind of in easy to understand language. And all of them go through kind of a similar format. And you can kind of see the outline on the right side of each of the screen caps. But basically, we tell you about why you should care. So all that stuff that Brittany was talking about for EAB, SLF, and Japanese beetle. We talk about where it's located, how it actually spreads, how it's managed, we give an overview of the forecasts. And for each of these, we have a short video that shows how you can actually understand the forecast for your location. We also talk about similar looking species to help you with identification of actually identifying the insect. And then we talk about signs of damage from that species, and then how you can help by either undertaking certain activities that will prevent the spread, and then also how you can report on your sightings. And these are available on our learning website, which I'll also put in the chat. It does require having a Nature's Notebook account, which is something I'll be talking about to access, but you just have to sign up with a username and a password for that. Next slide. So if you would like to either report on sightings in Nature's Notebook or take those learning modules, you'll want to get set up with a Nature's Notebook account. So you can do that by just creating an account. It's very simple. You'll want to then, if you're doing the actual documentation of when you're seeing the insects, you'll set up a location, and we call those a site. And then you'll add one or more animals. You can also add plants to track. And then what you're doing is you're actually making repeated observations, either of the same individual plants or on the same animal species at your site over time. Next slide. So in Nature's Notebook, we have actually over 1,900 different species available for monitoring. Most of these are not invasive insects. Most of them are kind of naturally occurring plants and animals, but they are available for species all across the country. We have a lot of training materials on that learning site that I mentioned. We have a whole observer certification course and lots of different support materials. We have the ability for you to make observations both independently as what we call a backyard observer, and then also with a group of people. So if you're involved in like a volunteer organization where you feel like you might want to do this with a group, we can get you set up with what's called a local phenology program, where you could actually set up a site for observation and then have multiple people make observations at that location and kind of share the duty of doing that data collection. And then we have lots of options for data visualization and download. That data visualization tool where we looked at the maps earlier in the video actually allows you to visualize lots of different information about the phenology of plants and animals for those 1,900 species. And then you can also download the data. All of the data are freely available for download. So you can do that in either a spreadsheet format in our phenology observation portal, or we have an R package that allows you if you want to do analysis that way. I also put a QR code here for our newsletter if you'd like to kind of just stay in touch with us generally. And then on the right, there is a screen cap of our data collection app. So you can either do data collection on our mobile app, or we also allow you to do printed data sheets that you then enter on the website. Next slide. So this is just showing you the observations that we have collected all across the country to show you kind of the spread of Nature's Notebook across the US. And the circles on there represent places that have collected lots of data. So you can see generally we have lots of people collecting data in urban areas where lots of people are, but we also have some areas where we have lots of data coming in from places like National Ecological Observatory Network sites and other partner organizations. So we have had over 42 million records submitted to the National Phenology Database since we were established in 2007. And we have generally about 3,500 to 4,000 observers each year, but we've had over, I think, 25,000 observers participate since the start of the program. Next slide. So if you are interested in tracking, for example, ash trees and EAB, Nature's Notebook is well suited for that. So you could, for example, register at a site, which you'll see on the left there. You could register an ash tree as well as EAB at the species level. And then typically weekly, our observers will go out and make observations. And the way it works, you can kind of see a screen cap of the data sheets on the right. You're looking for a suite of what we call phenophases. These are life cycle stages. So for an ash tree, it's things like breaking leaf buds when the first leaves are coming out on the tree, up to when the leaves are fully grown or when they even turn color and fall off the tree. We also ask about the flowering and then the fruiting. So each time you go out to observe, you will mark either a yes or a no. So you can say, no, I didn't see break and leaf buds, but yes, I saw leaves. And then we also have additional questions about intensity. So for example, for leaves, what percentage of the canopy was full? That helps us get at, where in the process are we in terms of that filling in of the canopy. And then on the bottom, we have a data sheet for EAB. So if you are observing these together, you might go out and report on your tree and say what's going on, and then look for EAB. And then maybe if you don't see anything, you could just say no for all of the different phenotypes. Next slide. An alternative for reporting is EdMap. So this is another organization that allows you to make more of an incidental report. So if you feel like I don't really want to set up a long-term observation site, maybe I'm just going to go out on a hike and I'm looking for EAB or another pest, or maybe you just happen to see one at a location where you're not going to be going back to frequently. EAB has, the EdMaps has a great way to make those incidental observations. So this is their report sightings page. You would just say whether you saw it, it's a positive record or negative, and then pick from the drop-down menu of which species you found. It'll fill in your observation date. You could say the life cycle stage and then some other details and submit a record that way. And those are also useful for us in our work. Next slide. And then lastly, I mentioned that we do try to do some validation. So through that pest patrol campaign where we're inviting people to submit records of the different phenoforecast species, we do get a number of records. We don't get a lot. We're trying to increase that, I think, because you do have to set up these long-term sites. Some people for invasive species aren't that interested in doing that. We're actually in the new app I mentioned, we're going to be working on adding one-time observation capabilities to do more of those incidental observations. And that'll be coming out next year. But for now, we do try to just see for the reports that we do get, how does that match up to what the forecast maps actually said was going to happen? So this is looking at for the different species that we forecast across the bottom, what was the percent accuracy? So you can see the overall percent. And then the blue indicates that the map said that, for example, the pest was there and the person reported the pest, or the map said that it wasn't there, and then the people said that there were no pests there. The other options are maybe the map said yes, but the person did not see the pest. That's not necessarily an error. It could be that the pest was there and they just didn't detect it, or maybe the map said it was there, but it was an area where the pests don't actually occur, and so obviously they weren't there. But in the cases of the green there, where we said it was not going to occur, but someone did report the pest, that's where we would worry a little bit more about the accuracy of those forecasts. But luckily for EAB, we had none of those reports, and also for spotted lanternfly, any of the reports where they didn't agree, where we said it was going to be there, but no one saw it. So so far, the forecasts are performing really well for these species, and we'll be looking at Japanese beetle in the future. We don't have that one here yet. I think that is it. So I'm going to pass it back to Brittany.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, so thank you. I'm going to go ahead and talk about a few applications of our forecasts, and I might potentially skip over a slide or two. I don't know, since we're running a little short on time. But let me go ahead. So I mentioned that adults are targeted for surveillance for EAB. And so I think that the pheno forecast for adult emergence will be particularly relevant for this. So as Erin mentioned, these maps show where these events are occurring relative to today. So if you live, for example, in these parts of like Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, up in Pennsylvania by the Philadelphia area, you're probably going to want to make sure that those traps are hung pretty soon, because adults are expected within a couple of weeks. Also for management, there are treatments, as I mentioned, that need to be applied prior to that prior to that life stage occurring. So for example, systemic insecticides are most effective if applied a few weeks before the stage will appear. Also these drenches right here for the ash trees. For parasitoids, those need to be released prior to that life stage being present. So for Obius, the EAB eggs need to be present. For the other parasitoids, the larval stage of EAB needs to be present. So as I mentioned, the parasitoids will have difficulty establishing, or they could die out completely if those life stages are not present for them to attack. For SLF, we can prioritize climatically suitable areas for surveillance. So SLF is a little less climatically tolerant than EAB. It's also interesting because it could be that the inability for SLF to complete its life cycle could also hinder establishment. So SLF is univoltine, meaning it only completes one generation per year. So if it does not reach the adult stage to lay eggs, that likely means it won't be able to complete its life cycle and therefore establish. So we have several areas in these like Rocky Mountains region, high elevation regions, in the Cascades, Sierra Nevadas. Potentially, the SLF will not be able to reach the stage where it's an adult and laying eggs. So in terms of surveillance, these forecasts can help you know when you should hang out these traps. For SLF, there are different traps available. There are circle traps, which apparently are a little more effective than some of these other sticky traps. And the trap uses methyl salicylate lure to attract insects. And then that kill strip, these kill strips finish the job. An ailanthus tree, the tree of heaven, is a preferred host for SLF. So oftentimes these traps are hung on the tree of heaven to make it even more likely that SLF will be captured. Again, this will help with early detection and therefore a rapid response to hopefully hinder or at least slow down the spread of SLF. In terms of management, nymphs and adults are targeted for contact insecticides, also biopesticides such as Beauveria species, which is an entomopathogen, sticky tape, and then other types of traps. So this Beauveria entomopathogen appears to be most effective when it is applied on younger adults. And so that would be one reason these forecasts might be useful, is to make sure that you're applying it on time to when the stage is most vulnerable. And also, potentially these forecasts will eventually be useful for biocontrol. So there are at least 2 species being studied for biocontrol for SLF. This includes an Anacetus orientalis, which is an egg parasitoid, and the second is Dryaenus sinicus, which attacks the second and third instar of spotted lanternfly nymphs. For Japanese beetle, adults are targeted for surveillance because the grubs, the larval stage and the pupae stage are in the soil, so they're very hard to see. They're very hard to find. So we can make sure that those traps are hung out on time. And also in terms of management of existing populations, the insecticides, for example, for the larval stage, they're most effective when those grubs are very young. So make sure we apply those when they're at their most vulnerable stage. Okay, so testimonials about pheno forecasts, and these are from Aaron, actually put these together. So the National Phenology Network is continually getting feedback from their stakeholders. And so I have a couple of quotes here. The first is by Dan Herms, who says, USA MPN degree day and pest phenology projections greatly facilitate the logistics of making geographically specific pest phenology forecasts and pest management recommendations. A second quote by Patrick Anderson, who's the Director of Research and Arborologist, is, I've used the USA NPN pest maps to see when pests may become active. I also wanted to mention that specific to EAB, I have received personal feedback from the Oregon Department of Forestry that our forecasts for adults were accurate to within a few days over the past couple of years, which is great, right? So it's really nice to see that people are using these forecasts and that they're performing well. The map to the left here is showing trap sites for EAB for 2024. So the red circles are areas where these purple prism traps were installed. And the forecast to the right here show it was produced on May 8th. So according to our forecast for 2025, as of May 8th, we would expect EAB adults to appear in about, let's see, next month. So sometime within the next month. And as Aaron mentioned, you can sign up to receive notifications prior to this event occurring, just because, it's hard to remember to like go visit the web page every other day or so. If you get those notifications, you won't have to remember. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here. I wanted to quickly mention that we do have a homepage for DDRP where we have our own versions of maps for all of the different 18 invasive insects that I mentioned. This is at uspest.org/caps. You can also access the rasters, so the gridded output files for all of the different species. and also access publications associated with the models or other like technical reports. We do have an interactive map for first adult emergence and first egg hatch for all the species. It's not quite the same as what Aaron was talking about. We have additional types of outputs that you cannot find at USA MPN's website, such as like the number of generations per year. If you click on this blue abbreviation here, so like ALB, ASRB, you can access every single output produced by the modeling platform. Okay, so takeaways. First, I hope that we convinced you why phenology and climate suitability forecasts are important. Phenology helps you know when to expect a life stage that's targeted by surveillance or management. Forecasts of climate suitability help you understand where to focus your search efforts so that you can hopefully detect that pest early and therefore prevent it from spreading to new locations. Takeaway two is that we need dynamic pest modeling tools such as the pheno forecast maps or DDRP and that delivered via like these pheno forecast maps. Climate is changing rapidly. Phenological events may occur earlier. We could have changing interactions between pests and like their biocontrol agents or other predators. Establishment risk is likely going to increase in certain regions. So for example, higher latitudes and higher elevations that were previously too cold for pests will become increasingly suitable. And as we all know, the climate change is not slowing down. Here's just some screen captures here of like just by NOAA. During a year of extremes, carbon dioxide levels are surging faster than ever. So we're going to, at least in the near term, we're not going to see any slowdown in rising temperatures. This plot over here to the right is showing that like kind of exponential increase of levels of CO2 that we have been tracking in Hawaii since the mid 1950s, just going up and up. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time. And here's a couple of web links for you. And we'd like to acknowledge Teresa Crimmins, Len Coop, Jeff Switzer, and also our funding from a USDA NIFA grant. And you can reach out to either myself or Aaron using the email addresses below. Thank you.